Hi, I'm Gillian Flynn. I'm the publisher of Gillian Flynn Books.
Hi, I'm Stacy Horn, and I am the author of The Killing Fields of East New York.
As you know, we've talked before, and I'm just such a fan of yours. I love your journalism. I think it's this amazing and very rare mix of stunning reporting with a really novelistic writing. I feel like I'm right there, and it's this drama that I'm watching on TV. I always prefer for the author to say what their book is about. They tend to have a better way of putting it than I do.
My book is about financial crimes from the 1960s and the 1970s that so completely devastated a Brooklyn neighborhood that it became known as the Killing Fields of East New York. The murder rate climbed so high, it was the highest in New York City by scamming groundbreaking civil rights legislation that was meant to help families of color. Financial criminals found a way instead to hurt them, but get very rich in the process. And all with the help of the United States government, who became one of their partners in crime.
You have a history of writing, but I also read the history of the Cold Case Squad and New York City homicide, and I know a lot of your work is centered on New York, and I'm wondering if how you came across this particular story.
Interesting that you mentioned the cold case book because it came from that. In the process of researching that book, I learned that East New York had the highest number of unsolved homicides in New York. So I thought, why? Why them as opposed to any other neighborhood in New York City? I learned that East New York was once a very nice neighborhood. All of a sudden in the 1960s, it collapsed, and very quickly. And it all can be traced back to these crimes that took place in the late 60s, early 70s. And everybody knows about the subprime mortgage scandal that happened in 2007, 2008. What they don't know is that it actually happened over 50 years ago in almost the same way.
It's absolutely gripping. It's funny to say, it's about the mortgage and housing, and HUD, and it's a page turner, and it absolutely is a page turner, and it's something that I didn't know about. We're talking about housing crises, and we're talking about subprime, and given the light of who is about to enter the White House, you have a convicted felon with this history of housing crime back to the 1970s. Do you have a guess of where we're heading?
Our president-elect was indicted for the crimes that I'm writing about. This is not a man who cares about affordable housing, so it's not going to be high on his priority. One of the things I hope this book shows is how destructive white-collar crime is, and how tragic it is that white-collar criminals get away with it over and over and over again. The wealthy have been tinkering with our criminal justice system for centuries, really, making it hard to gather evidence and hard to bring these cases to trial. With someone like Trump coming into office, what I predict is that it's going to get even harder to investigate and prosecute white-collar crimes, and the penalties and procedures to investigate and prosecute street criminals are going to get even tougher.
White-collar crimes aren't prosecuted in the way that, they can be just as devastating, as we see in your book, as murder itself, as far as destroying human beings, and yet we still don't take it very seriously, or seriously enough.
This has been true going back again for centuries, and it continues to be true. When East New York began to fall, and by the way, I want to make the point that I use East New York as my example, but this was happening all over the country in neighborhoods of color. Who did the criminal justice system focus on? The street criminals. New laws were enacted, new procedures were put in place, new sentencing guidelines were put into place, all focused on street crime and not the white collar criminals. And I mean, if you look at everything about our culture, feeds this narrative that street criminals are really, really scary. And white collar criminals, they're not afraid of them, and they should be. I mean, there's nobody more ruthless than a white collar criminal. They will just knowingly, and with a smile, lure the most vulnerable populations in the United States to do something that they know is going to hurt them and could even kill them. And everything in the criminal justice system supports this. There's a thing called exceptional clearances. The NYPD can close a murder case without arresting anyone.
That they don't have the case necessarily, but they can close it because they know who.
They know who did it.
Can't necessarily prove it in court, sort of.
But he's dead, for instance, or he's already in jail, or he's went to another country where we don't have an extradition agreement. But they have to prove it. Like the DA has to sign off on it, and all sorts of people have to sign off on it that yes, they have all this evidence, and were we able to take this to court, we would have. Okay. And at the same time that the murder rate in East New York was going up, so were the number of exceptional clearances. So it's not unusual to have 1, 2, 3, or 4 exceptional clearances a year, but during this certain time period, it was like 10, 20, and it went up to over 100 exceptional clearances. If they didn't have the case, that means 100 or more murderers were walking around East New York free because they were closing these cases without enough evidence.
You sense a lot of people trying to do the right thing against the forces of this entire institutional system that is designed to help people do the wrong thing, basically. It almost feels like that. It almost feels like it's been designed to have different loopholes and trapdoors and everything in it to be able to get away with these things.
That's exactly it. Like white collar criminals can get away with anything. Street criminals, I don't know, they don't pay their bill, at a restaurant, and this is news.
Yeah, exactly. If you could have people take a primary message away from this book or a primary bit of knowledge about it, was there anything that really keeps your belly on fire after, I'm sure, what was many years of researching it?
Honestly, we've already said it over and over and over. White collar criminals, bad. They are the bad guys. You may not be afraid of running into a banker in a dark alley, but you really should be.
Yep. I love it. Thank you, Stacy, so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And thank you for publishing my book.
Oh my gosh, it was a pleasure.